All right, so political parties certainly winding down their campaigns ahead of Wednesday's elections. The May 29th poll is said to be the most hotly contested since 1994. Let's continue making sense of the developments so far. Very honored to be joined now by Professor Lesiba Teffo, who is a political analyst whose voice, of course, has permeated our minds in the lead up to this poll, and greatly so. It's lovely to be engaging you, sir. Welcome to the SABC.
Good morning to you and the viewers at home.
Without putting any pressure, there's a lot to consider, right, given everything that's taken place in the lead up to this moment. And the question I often ponder, wrestle with, is whether there's any single way anybody would be able to characterize the electioneering so far. You know, has there been a golden thread running through what people have had to say, the sentiment on the ground, perhaps the posture of politicians? It's a big question, and I know a difficult place to start, but let's start there nonetheless. How would you characterize how things have fared so far?
Yeah, let me preface my response by saying, as I was looking at you, a question came that I wanted to start with, namely, why is there so much excitement? What is unique about us? Many people, many countries across the globe hold elections. But when it comes to us, literally everything comes to a standstill. And it's all about elections. We no longer even apply ourselves when it comes to our work, right? Be it academics, be it professionals, almost everybody is caught up in this. And I think we still have some distance to go when we see this as nothing but a normal process that will come and go. But we must continue to do what we are supposed to do. For me, I put less emphasis on this. I understand for now, we are a small country caught up in many things. But I've come to accept that periodic elections in Africa almost mean nothing. Rituals. Because they don't often translate into anything meaningful to the existential experience of the disadvantaged. The privilege will continue to be privileged. The underdog will remain an underdog. Despite all the promises we make. And somebody said to me, fables and tales yesteryear when I was at primary school. We said, long ago, or once upon a time. These days, we say, if you elect me, I promise you. These are almost fable stories that are inconsequential. I'm saying this deliberately and intentionally and provoking those who are listening to me. That how are we going to turn it around for the benefit of the small men out there on the ground, the wretched of the earth?
Wow, a line there from Frans Fanon, of course. And it's interesting you start there because I can almost hear the chatter retorting back at you that in fact in 1994 that election certainly mattered, and the wretched of the earth of this country did have in some instances their material conditions affected. And who's to say that perhaps another one of those moments is on the horizon?
Oh, yes. Yes, I'm a senior student of philosophy, by the way. Eternal optimist, but realistically optimistic. I'm not naive. I'm not obsequiously obedient. In 1994, there are many scholars, including academics and politicians, especially those who belong to the ruling party, who have come out to say the dream has been deferred. We have betrayed the expectations of our people. Where did it go wrong? They are at each other's throat, not me. They are the ones who are telling me that we haven't done. In fact, if they were to wake up, you remember a man by the name of Chrysanthi? I remember him saying, what I fear most is that my own, when they take over, they will be focusing on the palaces and the Mercedes-Benz. And I remember one man by the name of Oliver Tambo saying to all who care to listen, yes, one day we will get independence. But remember, a corrupt ANC will be worse than a corrupt National Party. What am I saying? Can we pause and reflect and reboot? We still have a chance. But if we don't listen, 10 years, 20 years down the line, we'll look back and say, where did we lose a plot?
Sure. It's a lot to take in. All right. That being said, I think it might be still safe to say that the conditions in this environment, in this democratic ecosystem, is not like it is in many of our peers on the continent. And I can almost imagine, those who are the custodians of getting us to this point saying, therein lies testament of our efforts, of the work we have put in. Perhaps we haven't reached a promised land, but my goodness, what a far distance we are from where we started. Would that be fair?
Yeah. Look, lest I'm misunderstood, more people have electricity today. More people have water. But I don't put a lot of emphasis or a premium on the RDP houses. No man takes pride in any man building his or a house for her. Make it possible for him or for her to build a house. There are many today who access education through this current government. You know why the people are angry on the ground? They are mindful of that. They are aware of that. They are appreciative of that. But they say, were it not for the corruption that is rampant, we would be better off. That's all that the people are saying. They aren't saying nothing has happened. And when they speak that language and they look the ostentatious life people lead, right? The arrogance of power that people demonstrate, that's what makes people angry, my brother. That's what, and I don't know why we are where we are, because we knew before we took over what is called the sins of incumbency, cronyism, nepotism, alienation from the electorate, the very people, right, that have elected you, the compradors, those that have liberated you, turning against you. We knew about this. We studied, and we were supposed not to find ourselves in this situation. Yes, we are. We can't deny that, but maybe we can still redeem ourselves.
Right. Speaking about that redemption, I mean, there are people who say that, each country, society gets the government they deserve. The individuals who are in these positions don't put themselves there. And I think therein also lies a fascinating, perhaps philosophical, sociological question around why it is, despite the anger you have described, we find ourselves looking at the leaderboard like the one behind us now, essentially telling the same story since the dawn of our democracy.
Yeah, look, that's a good one. In one of my classes, I say, a people get a leadership they deserve, and a leadership gets a people it deserves. A people gets a government it deserves, and a government gets a people it deserves. That's all. And people must take responsibility for that and not blame the sun, right? It must just be acknowledged. We are the authors of our own demise, or we have our destiny in our hands. If after all these years, and the people say, we are happy with what we have had in the past 8 years, who am I to say no? But I can hear somebody at the back of my mind, and it's only an African who is gifted in a certain way, other than others perhaps, that despite all they see, they still say, that notwithstanding, but that's where we want to go. This is the person we want. This is the woman that we want to lead us or not to lead us. You're talking about sociology and philosophy. That's what fascinates me most. That despite all this is, I'm suddenly, the very people that I work with, learned, educated intellectuals, who maligned the ruling party, now they say, but there is no alternative. I say to them, no, there is no alternative. You are the alternative. Who must come from Mars and create an alternative for you? We always look for excuses. We don't want to take responsibility for our plight.
Yeah.
We always want to look for somebody to blame and then say there is no alternative. It's not about the alternative to the ANC. If it is about the ANC, you can also go inside and work with it to help turn it around. But don't sit back and say there is no alternative.
The risk we run sometimes, of course, is to kind of anthropologize people who want to vote in certain ways without giving them, quite frankly, the due autonomy, quite frankly, that they should have, right? Okay. There are people who have thought it through. There are people who are able to justify it and will still go and make particular decisions at the polls. And if their democratic rights are anything to go by, they shouldn't be scoffed at. That's what they've decided to do with their power.
Yes, I'm happy with that. You know what? So some of the ways that have been corrupted, especially in our space on the African continent, we all do this since we even destroy, harm and hurt our own in the name of democracy. That's the most corrupted concept. With that, I wish we could find an alternative to it. And then coming to the vote, I will never undermine, belittle, or belittle anybody who chooses in any way. My job as a philosopher, my job as an academic, as an intellectual, is not to say vote X or Z. Help people to make informed decisions. But those that I see, by far the majority of them, they don't know why they are voting. Safe to say, it's historical. It is our political whole. By the way, after Monday, they will be waiting by the intersections, looking for jobs from the very people that they insult and malign. After five weeks, they will be talking about against the very government they shall have elected. Then that's where I say, maybe I have a duty to help them make informed decisions. That by X, the X that you cross there, you make there on the ballot paper, says, I mandate you to act on my behalf. But by the same X, I will recall you. But not in my country, because people don't elect their own. The parties elect for them. But if you had an electoral act that empowered people to choose their own from their own constituency, they would be able to take Ayanda where you are seated and say, brother, you have what it takes to represent our village, our community, our region. And we'll send you through this X. And by virtue of this very X, we shall recall you. You will always be remindful, I'm accountable to those people, and they might recall me.
We thought people would still be able to have those kind of reflections in our current system, but alas, maybe that buffer that parties give them makes them, allows them to be disillusioned, right? To build those mansions that you alluded to. I'm interested, though, to find out whether or not part of the reason why we're here is because many people don't believe that the X they make ultimately translates into the material conditions in their homes, in their communities. And therein, I think, lies a very serious crisis around how we interact with our democracy, if in fact it is to continue surviving.
Yeah. You see, this morning I heard on one of the radio stations that there are about 7.5 to 8 million, let's say, rough number, of people today, a day before the elections, who are still undecided. They are grappling with the meaning of the X. What is it that it would yield or give to them? Right? Some can rationalize this way or that way. But those are the people of interest to me that I would want to have them in a classroom and say, please tell me why. And then from there, how do we go forward? We cannot just let it go and say they don't want to vote. What is it that make them not to vote? Yet in 1994, they were so excited and they all went out to vote.
I'm sure you must have interacted with some of them. What do you think the answers to that might be? I mean, in a context where, of course, we're still grappling with that question. Because you're right, it's incredibly fascinating. I think it's a question asked by a number of stakeholders. All those people wanting to get into power, asking themselves those questions. We, as members of the media, often labor the question. I have no doubt the IEC is interested to find out what it is they can do differently to draw people who choose not to participate in this aspect of our democracy. But what do the academics say?
Oh yes, one of the simplest things that UNISA is good at, has been good at, and I was part thereof, voter education. There was a program called Management of Democratic Elections on the African continent. Over 45 countries on the continent participated in that program, and almost 900 graduates from the IECs on the African continent went through that. And emphasis was on voter education. We are not doing much. In other countries, by the way, voter education is part of the syllabus. Just next door in Botswana, it's part of the program, right? It's a civic duty. And I know also, by the way, in one part of the world where I lived, it's also a civic duty that is punishable by law.
I was about to ask you, and vote. Should we, start criminalizing people not voting?
Yes, I lived in that part of the world, where it's compulsory to go. But it never reaches that stage because it's so internalized. It's part of the ecosystem. It's in the DNA. After 5 years, and they know the benefits of doing that. Some of the people who don't vote here, they say, I have tried it many a times, Joe, it doesn't benefit me. So I'm sorry, spare me that. Allow me just to go into the field and till it for the benefit of my children. You know, and one of the sad things about it is what I call political economy. And some people are saying that a small country like us, it has over 400 political parties, and you have got 53 presidential candidates.
Right, on the national ballot, yes.
Yes, if you like, agree?
Right.
You have got 53 people, all of whom says, I can be. But one interesting thing on this one, of the 53 parties.
One of them.
Yeah, one of the interesting things, right, about this presidential candidates, all of them, there is only one woman. Yeah. Society still have a long way to one woman out of how many political parties in the country?
Right. Well, I think it's two, because the Good Party has Patricia de Lille and Sarah is got
I forgot.
Colleen Makubele. Yes.
Makubela.
Right.
I had Makubele in mind.
Right.
At least de Lille is there. But that is it. Political economy.
Yeah.
But there is something about this ritual. This what I call a ritual, this election and what have you. I know I'll take a rap, but I'm always ready for that, by the way, right?
And let's go there, because that's also where you started. Let me finish
this one before we go there.
Sure.
This one, right? Again, there is also something good about it, this ritual. Because when I look around, the economy in the last 3 months has been doing well. When it comes to the T-shirts, right? Transport, right? The ladies and the men and women who are selling around and about the stadium, the cars putting petrol, the trucks, the buses, taking people from one point to another. When I look at that, money has been unleashed into the community, into the society. And that's why sometimes I say, maybe we need this thing after every 2 years, just for the sake of the economy to run.
Right.
And then we give it another name. Then after 5 years, we shall give it the appropriate name.
Hopefully the spin-offs are spin-offs and not necessarily the main idea, but point well made and point taken, certainly. The idea of this being a ritual, I think you're right, is going to rile up a lot of people who have invested a lot of sentiment even in this election, right?
And I want to provoke them to think about what I'm saying.
Yeah, because it almost corners us into this existential crisis. You want to believe that there is an opportunity on the horizon for something to change, and a lot of people are pinning that opportunity on the 29th of May. You're not convinced. Why?
I have been around. I have heard it all. And I hear people talk, I say, you know what, the only difference is the person who's saying it, the color of the skin perhaps, and the English they use. They'll talk about jobs, corruption, unemployment, energy. Why can't they come together and form one or two parties and see how best they can serve the people, right? Therein lies my skepticism and cynicism, that it's not about the people, it's about the self. And politics for me, as far as I understand it, is about the other and not about the self. It's about being public spirited. You are out there to serve the public and not the self. But you can't tell me that the people are wrong when they say, no, it is about themselves and not about us. And you say, why? And yes, I've tried it at least 4 or 5 times when I was voting, but I'm still where I am. And some of us, our conditions are worse off than they were under the homeland system. If you go to Bupitatswana, around the Mahikeng, people will look at the infrastructure then say, what? Under the old man, under Tautona, life was far better than what it is. I'm not talking about ideology, because it's too cheap to take me on and say X and Z. People don't eat slogans, my brother. They eat pap and flakes. That's what they're about.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have certainly had those sentiments shared even on the SABC. People, quite frankly, wondering about whether or not it might have been better before 1994. So I absolutely hear that. I imagine, though, the answer is not having an election, if you know what I mean.
Yes. No. Even if I call it a ritual, I want to quite challenge them, right? Continue, but give it a substance that would translate, right, in meaningful change to the life experiences of the wretched of the earth. You and I are privileged, but go out there and tell them this is 30 years of democracy. Yes, for you guys who are educated, for the learned, and for the political connected. But what about me? And another lady says to me, I've got 3 children, they are all graduates, they are sitting at home and they are living off my grant.
Sure.
Please.
Fascinating.
Please.
All right, we'll tie it there for now, because there's a lot to be considered and a lot to think about.
Thank
but
you.
Very insightful provocations. Professor Lesiba Teffo, part of our contributors here at the SABC, as we continue making sense of this moment and what it means, no matter where you stand and what the implications are. It's a fascinating discussion. Much of our discussions will continue here.